Bonjour, Kinamagi Nene Ireland Indigenous, and welcome to the latest episode of our U.S. citizenship study. This week's episode features citizenship study questions 61 to 65. And I welcome you to this episode. The reminder that the purpose of these videos is to help students gain civic knowledge, much in the same way that our immigrant population would master this when working towards becoming full citizens. So let's focus on question 61 first. What is one thing that Benjamin Franklin is famous for? And immediately most people's minds go to flying a kite in a thunderstorm. But he was also an inventor, a postmaster general, a diplomat, and the oldest member of the Constitutional Convention.
What is one thing Benjamin Franklin is famous for? Benjamin Franklin was a famous American. He lived from 1706 to 1790. Benjamin Franklin was an inventor. He invented many things that we use today. He invented bifocal eyeglasses. He invented the Franklin stove. Franklin was the writer of Poor Richard's Almanac. It was a book with information about the weather and other topics. Franklin became the first Postmaster General of the United States in 1775. He created the postal or mail system in the United States. Also, he started the first free libraries. Later, he was a U.S. diplomat. He was the oldest member at the Constitutional Convention. Benjamin Franklin was famous for many reasons.
Now let's look at question 62. Who is the father of our country? And the answer to that is George Washington.
Who is the father of our country? George Washington is called the father of our country. He was the general of the American Army during the War of Independence. He was the first president of the United States. He became a symbol for the new government. His image is on the $1 bill. Many places are named for George Washington. The capital of the United States is named Washington, D.C. One of the 50 states is named Washington. George Washington is the father of our country.
And our next question, 63, who was the first president? If you're like Mr. Ireland, the last answer was George Washington. You're right. And so was this one.
Who was the first president? George Washington was the first president of the United States. He was president from 1789 to 1797. Before he became president, George Washington was the general of the American Army. George Washington decided to stop being president after 2 four-year terms. Today, we follow his example. No one can be the president for more than 2 four-year terms. George Washington was the first president of the United States.
As mentioned in there, no president can be more than 2 four-year terms. That is now codified in our United States Constitution. And that came following FDR's 4 consecutive elections during the Great Depression and World War II. So let's move on to question 64. What territory did the United States buy from France in 1803 for a whopping $15 million? That answer is the Louisiana Territory.
What territory did the United States buy from France in 1803? The United States bought the Louisiana Territory from France in 1803. After the U.S. gained independence, many Americans believed that the country should expand. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson bought the Louisiana Territory for $15 million. This land doubled the size of the United States. American Indians and European settlers lived on this land. After the United States bought the Louisiana Territory, many more settlers moved west.
And now question 65. What are the three wars fought by the United States in the 1800s? And if you're like Mr. I, there are four answers here. That's correct. The test asks you to name 3 out of 4. And let's learn a little bit more about these 4 wars.
Name one war fought by the United States in the 1800s. The United States fought 4 wars in the 1800s. The War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the Civil War, and the Spanish-American War. The United States fought Mexico in the Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848. The United States wanted to expand west. In 1846, the government of the United States decided it wanted land that belonged to Mexico. Many citizens of the United States and Mexico lived on that land. The United States won the war. The land that was once part of Mexico became part of the United States. That land now forms the states of California, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming. The United States fought the Mexican-American War in the 1800s. The United States also fought the War of 1812, the Civil War, and the Spanish-American War.
And that Spanish-American War was fought in the late 1890s. And one famous member of the American military at that time, Teddy Roosevelt, who would go on to be the president. You have now reached the conclusion of this week's episode. Just a reminder that I do not have any claim to videos contained within. They are all found via Google search or through Smithsonian websites. There is a Quizlet linked in the Google Classroom and in the Google slide where you can practice questions for this week's episode and the previous episodes. So without further ado, I wish you all a Minogijigad, Minwa, Bamapi.